Watch closely. This isn't edited. There's no dramatic slow motion or zoom-in replay. What you're about to witness is real, raw, and unfiltered. At exactly 10:42 a.m. Vatican time, during Pope Leo XIV's weekly general audience in St. Peter's Square, something flew through the air. And it hit him. Not near him. Not beside him. It hit him. The object, still unidentified by Vatican authorities at the time of this recording, made contact with the Pope's left shoulder. And for a brief moment, the entire square, packed with thousands of pilgrims, tourists, and journalists, fell into stunned silence. A gasp rippled through the crowd. You could feel it like a wave, awe, fear, confusion, all crashing together. And yet, in the eye of that storm, was him. Pope Leo XIV. Unshaken. Unmoved. Unbothered. Let me take you back just a few moments before it happened. The square was alive. That unique Vatican energy, a mixture of reverence and electric excitement. Flags from over 40 countries fluttered in the breeze. Children sat on their parents' shoulders. Pilgrims wept as the Pope appeared on the Pope Mobile, waving slowly, smiling softly. It was like any other Wednesday. Until it wasn't. From the left flank of the crowd, just beyond the third colonnade pillar near the obelisk, the object was launched. Security footage would later reveal a raised hand and a small arc. Nothing aggressive. Nothing fast. But intentional. It didn't fall from above. It wasn't dropped. It was thrown. Now let's pause here. You might be wondering, was it an act of aggression? A political message? A disturbed individual? No. Not exactly. Because when Vatican officials recovered the object, they found something both familiar and a little strange. It was a doll. Not just any doll. A hand-knitted miniature pope, a replica of Leo XIV, complete with white cassock and red slippers. Sound familiar? It should. Just 3 weeks earlier, another similar doll had made headlines when Pope Leo caught it. Midair with one hand, no flinch, no fumble. That moment went viral. The image was shared millions of times. The Pope with reflexes, they called him. But this time, he didn't catch it. Security moved quickly. Swiss guards stepped forward. One cardinal beside the Holy Father shifted his seat nervously. A nun in the front row covered her mouth in disbelief. And then, something beautiful happened. Pope Leo turned his head, saw the doll at his feet, and laughed. Not a fake laugh. Not a diplomatic smile. A genuine, belly-deep chuckle that rippled through the microphone and into the hearts of everyone watching. It was the kind of laugh that disarms tension. That says, I'm okay. You're okay. Let's all breathe. But the story doesn't end there. Because what followed was one of the most unexpected, unscripted moments of his entire papacy so far. Pope Leo stood up. He motioned for the doll. A guard picked it up and handed it to him. He looked at it closely, smiled again, and held it up high like a trophy to the crowd. The square erupted in cheers. Cameras clicked. Phones rose. And just like that, the chaos began to dissolve, replaced by a kind of joy. A realization that even in moments of uncertainty, grace can enter. Let's talk about who Pope Leo XIV is, and why this moment matters. Born Giovanni Rinaldi, Pope Leo XIV has quickly become one of the most recognizable spiritual figures in the modern world. Unlike some of his predecessors, he carries with him a disarming authenticity. He doesn't posture. He doesn't pretend. He talks about baseball. Yes, baseball. He grew up in Chicago. A lifelong White Sox fan. And that little detail, his love for a simple American sport, has become one of the most relatable parts of his image. He's the Pope who references outfielders in his homilies. The one who signed a baseball for a child in Manila. The one who once said, "Sometimes, catching grace is like catching a fly ball in the sun. You don't see it until it's in your glove." So when a doll struck his shoulder, and he didn't flinch, people noticed. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was real. Now let's go behind the scenes. What happens when something hits the Pope, physically, during a live public event? Well, the Vatican has protocols. Silent signals. Hidden gestures. Plans rehearsed by the Swiss Guard for years. And yet, in this case, those plans were paused. Why? Because of him. He waved off additional security. He told them he was fine. He signaled to continue the audience as planned. That in itself says everything. But let's not overlook the tension. Because even though this incident was seemingly harmless, it raised serious questions. One Vatican insider, speaking anonymously, said, "This could have been something else. Something sharp. Something dangerous. We can't ignore that." And he's right. The crowd was not screened thoroughly that morning. There were no metal detectors at the far entrance. The doll was inside a gift bag, making it easier to conceal. And let's be honest, the Vatican is sacred ground, but it's not immune to global unrest. In a world where public figures are often targets, and political rage simmers beneath the surface, even the smallest breach feels significant. So what now? Do we tighten security to the point where the people can no longer reach their shepherd? Do we build taller barriers, both physical and emotional? Or do we take a moment to reflect on what happened? Because in that single second, when the doll struck his shoulder, we saw three things. 1. Vulnerability. He is human. Mortal. Breakable. 2. Composure. He did not retaliate. He did not fear. 3. Compassion. He received the gift anyway. Let's rewind again, not to the moment of impact, but to something quieter. Just before the incident, Pope Leo had been speaking about the unexpected ways love reaches us. His words were, "God is not always thunder. Sometimes he arrives in interruptions. In laughter. In the thing we didn't plan for." And then, an object interrupted. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe, as some faithful believe, it was a divine metaphor. A reminder that grace doesn't always come in robes and choirs. Sometimes, it arrives as a flying yarn doll. Pope Leo XIV once described his papacy as a walking ministry. He wants to be seen in the streets, among the people. He insists on using open vehicles. He refuses to isolate himself with glass walls. This is beautiful and dangerous. And moments like today highlight that tension. The crowd loves him. Too much, perhaps. They shout. They reach. They cry. They throw. Not out of disrespect, but out of devotion. Still, love without boundaries can become chaos. And chaos, in a sacred space, must be gently reformed. As Vatican security begins reviewing today's footage, conversations are already happening. Behind closed doors. There will likely be changes. New protocols. Possibly even new barriers. But if you ask Pope Leo what should change, he'll probably say, nothing. Because today, despite the scare, he stayed. He stayed seated. He stayed present. He stayed soft. In a world growing harder by the hour, he stayed soft. As we close part 1 of this story, I want you to sit with this question. What would have happened if he had reacted with fear instead of faith? Would the crowd have panicked? Would the moment have turned tragic? We'll never know, because that's not the choice he made. He chose peace. He chose grace. And maybe, That's the kind of power the world needs most right now. What happens when the world falls in love with a pope? Not just in the spiritual sense, not just reverence for the office or admiration for his teachings, but in the very real, very human way people fall in love with celebrities, heroes, icons. Because make no mistake, Pope Leo XIV has become all of that. And more. The moment that soft yarn doll struck his shoulder, and the world gasped, wasn't just a one-time spectacle. It was the culmination of something deeper. Something that's been building since the first day of his papacy. Let's take a closer look at that. It began simply enough. When Pope Leo XIV, born Giovanni Rinaldi, first emerged on the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica after the white smoke cleared, the reaction was curious. Not thunderous. Not skeptical. Just curious. He didn't carry himself like a monarch. There was no stiff wave. No rehearsed smile. Instead, he looked like someone who had just walked out of a family gathering, warm, little surprised, and deeply, deeply human. And that's what changed everything. From the beginning, Leo XIV spoke plainly. No pomp. No ancient Latin recitations for show. No veiled theological puzzles. Just honesty. He said things like, "The church must be where the people are, not just where the walls are. And if our doors are wide, but our hearts are narrow, we are no different than a museum." That kind of language? It pierced through centuries of ecclesiastical fog. And people, ordinary people, began to lean in. Not just Catholics. Not just believers. But seekers. Doubters. Wanderers. They began to see in this pope not a relic of religion, but a reflection of something they'd forgotten still existed, hope. And then came the moments. Oh, the moments. They were small, often unscripted, but impossible to ignore. When he stopped his convoy to bless a street vendor's baby in Bogota. When he washed the feet of refugees, Muslim, Christian, and atheist alike. During Holy Week. When he quietly visited a prison in the Philippines with no cameras allowed, just to pray with inmates in the dark. These weren't media stunts. They were reminders. Reminders that the papacy wasn't built on gold chairs and silk vestments. It was built on sandals, dusty roads, open hands. And with every viral clip, every whispered story, every unexpected gesture, the public image of Pope Leo XIV grew. Not like a politician. Not like a royal. But like something entirely new, a pop-cultural spiritual force. Memes emerged. Fan accounts exploded on TikTok and Instagram. Hashtags like #PapaLeo and #DollForThePope trended worldwide. There were t-shirts, coffee mugs, animated videos. Someone even made a Pope Catch video edit, slow-motion clips of him catching flying objects set to dramatic movie scores. And then, the dolls came. Let's talk about the dolls. They started as a sweet tribute from a small group of Italian grandmothers, knitters from a parish in Milan who called themselves the Wool Apostles. They handcrafted a plush version of Pope Leo XIV, complete with glasses, cross necklace, and the slightest belly bulge under his cassock. They sent one to the Vatican by mail. No reply. So they decided to toss one during an audience. That was the first viral moment. The now iconic catch. And just like that, a movement was born. Now, nearly every general audience includes at least one airborne doll. Different colors. Different expressions. Some even come with accessories, baseball gloves, microphones, even tiny handwritten notes of blessing. It's cute. It's creative. But it's also complicated. Because here's the truth no one wants to say out loud. When we idolize the image of a leader, we risk forgetting the message. This isn't new. Throughout history, spiritual leaders, prophets, saints, reformers, have been turned into icons while their warnings go ignored. We build statues while ignoring sermons. We wear t-shirts but skip the teachings. Are we doing that with Pope Leo XIV? Are we so mesmerized by his relatability, his reflexes, his warmth, that we're forgetting his calls to radical compassion, economic reform, and ecclesial accountability? Ask yourself, when was the last time we shared one of his actual homilies, not just the funny clip of him with a soccer ball? Don't misunderstand. This isn't about scolding joy. It's okay to celebrate a leader who makes us smile. But moments like the incident in St. Peter's Square, when a well-meaning gesture becomes a safety risk, remind us that even love, when left unchecked, can become a kind of pressure. It's a lesson the Vatican is beginning to wrestle with. Sources inside the Vatican Communications Office have confirmed that discussions are underway about the culture of gift-throwing at public events. While not officially banned, yet there's growing concern. One senior Swiss guard, who asked to remain unnamed, said, "We know the people love him. We love him too. But love must have limits when it begins to blur with danger. A yarn doll is fine until someone throws something else. It's not paranoia. It's preparedness. Even devotion has shadows. And the Vatican is now trying to walk a tightrope. How do you protect the man without alienating the people?" Meanwhile, Pope Leo XIV remains Pope Leo. After the incident, he asked to keep the doll that hit him. He later made a quiet joke to one of the guards. "Next time, I'll bring a mitt." And when asked whether he wanted to address the crowd about what happened, he declined. Instead, he said, "Let us talk today not about what struck me, but about what struck Christ. Let's talk about grace, not fear." That's who he is. That's what makes him different. Still, as the world continues to elevate him, sometimes to impossible heights, we have to wonder, how much can one man carry? How many expectations? How many headlines? How many flying objects? Because while Pope Leo XIV may have the patience of a saint, he's still just a man. There's an old saying in church history. Every pope walks with two shadows, the one cast by his predecessors, and the one cast by the people's projections. In Leo XIV's case, those projections are massive. Some see him as the great reformer. Others as the last hope. Still others as a spiritual celebrity. But who is he really? A humble man in his late 60s who prays in the morning, weeps when no one sees, and still smiles when someone throws a handmade doll his way. He's not trying to be famous. He's trying to be faithful. And so, we arrive at this moment in time, a crossroads, perhaps. The world adores this Pope. The Vatican braces for his safety. The faithful try to touch his robes like in the gospel stories of old. And amid it all, a simple question remains. Can we love him without turning him into a brand? As the sun sets on St. Peter's Square tonight, the marble reflects both light and shadow. Just like this story. Just like us. The object hit him. A harmless doll, yes. But a symbol of something far larger. That impact, brief, accidental, yet unforgettable, has now stirred one of the most urgent conversations in Vatican City. Behind the laughter, the smiles, and the brilliant recovery by Pope Leo XIV, there's a ripple. A subtle but growing concern. Security officials, cardinals, global leaders, and even the press are asking, can the Pope continue this way? Can he keep walking among the people without a barrier? Can he embrace unpredictability, in a world that grows more unpredictable by the day? Let's walk through what's happening behind the scenes. The Vatican press office hasn't released an official statement on the object-throwing incident. Yet. But insiders confirm a closed-door meeting was held within 48 hours. Those in the room included the commander of the Swiss Guard, Vatican's Secretary of State, the Pope's chief of protocol, and a discreet security liaison from Italian intelligence. The question on the table? Do we change the rules? Do we increase distance? Add bulletproof shielding back to the Pope mobile? Screen gifts more rigorously? Restrict where and how the Pope is visible? And perhaps the most controversial question of all. Do we limit his contact with the public, for his safety? Now let's be honest. These conversations aren't new. Pope John Paul II's 1981 assassination attempt forced the Vatican to rethink security from top to bottom. That incident, a single gunshot in St. Peter's Square, changed the papacy forever. The bulletproof Pope Mobile was born. Visibility became balanced with caution. But Pope Leo XIV has challenged that balance. He prefers walking, talking, reaching. His theology of presence, this idea that spiritual leadership must be embodied, not elevated, is at the core of how he sees his mission. He once told a group of seminarians, "A shepherd should smell like his sheep. But how can I smell like the people if I am always behind glass?" That statement, as poetic as it is, now carries heavier weight. Because while the flying object this time was a symbol of love, what about next time? Vatican security is trained for every scenario. They scan for anomalies, track movement patterns, read faces. But no system is flawless. No protection is absolute. And when love becomes enthusiasm, and enthusiasm becomes chaos, even the best trained guards can be overwhelmed. It's not about fear. It's about foresight. One cardinal was overheard saying, "The Holy Father's humility is holy, but if we don't protect him, we risk becoming caretakers of his memory instead of companions in his mission." That's the tension now. How do you protect a man who refuses to be protected? Meanwhile, the Pope himself remains unfazed. He resumed his regular schedule the very next day. Morning Mass in the Domus Sancti Marthi. Meetings with 2 visiting bishops. A surprise visit to a soup kitchen near Piazza Navona. And yes, at the soup kitchen, he joked with volunteers about the incident. "I've always prayed for patience. I didn't know God would test me with flying dolls." He smiled, but his message was serious. "I'm still here. I'm not going anywhere." Let's talk about that mindset, and what it says about leadership. In a world where most public figures hide behind walls, distance, or even avatars, Pope Leo XIV shows up in person. No filters. No handlers whispering in his ear. Just him. He shakes hands. He blesses children. He meets the eyes of those who disagree with him. This kind of presence is rare, risky, and deeply powerful. But it also puts him at risk, not just physically, but emotionally. Because when you open yourself up to the world, you also open yourself up to being hurt by it. The doll incident has sparked a movement in 2 directions. One group, primarily Vatican insiders, is urging more protection. Another group, everyday Catholics, pilgrims, and admirers online, is doubling down on admiration. #Hands of Grace trended for 2 days after the incident. People across social media shared how Pope Leo's response, calm, unshaken, forgiving, moved them more than any speech ever could. One woman from Argentina wrote, "When he smiled after being hit, I cried. Because that's what Christ did too. He didn't push away the crowd, he blessed them." Another young man from Nigeria posted, "I don't follow the church closely, but something about this Pope. I trust him. He's real. Real. That's the word that keeps coming up. In a world drowning in curated personas and political posturing, Pope Leo XIV is refreshingly real. And it's this very realness that draws people to him, and makes it nearly impossible for the Vatican to build walls around him. Because the minute they do, they risk severing what makes him so beloved: access. Access to a man who listens, who walks, who catches flying gifts with grace and humor. But there's a deeper truth under all of this. Something spiritual. Something that echoes beyond politics and security protocols. Moments like this, small, surprising disruptions, have always been where God speaks loudest. A throne object. A pope who stays calm. A doll turned symbol. These aren't just viral moments. They're sacred interruptions. They force us to pause. To ask, what are we projecting onto this man? Are we protecting him, or preserving our need to feel close to holiness? Do we admire the office, or the individual? And perhaps most of all, what kind of church are we becoming? One that hides its shepherd, or one that trusts him to walk among the sheep? As of now, no new papal security protocols have been announced publicly. But we've heard rumors. A new, distance zone may be marked in St. Peter's Square during audiences. Bags may be restricted more strictly. Certain sections of the crowd may be chosen in advance for screening. The Swiss Guard may be upgraded with new surveillance tech, facial scanners, AI tracking software, drone sweeps. Is it necessary? Maybe. But is it what Pope Leo would choose? Probably not. Because for him, the papacy isn't about distance, it's about direction. Let's close with what happened this morning. Less than 72 hours after the incident, Pope Leo stepped onto the same platform in the square, same time, same crowd, same path. And someone, quietly, gently, handed him another doll. This time, not thrown. Not airborne. Just offered, in peace. And he took it. He held it close. He whispered something only that pilgrim could hear. Then he looked at the crowd and said, "Thank you for your love. But let's remember, I am not the message. I am only the microphone. If I break, the message lives on. But while I have breath, I will walk with you." That's Pope Leo XIV. And that's the moment the crowd wept, not because he was struck, but because he stayed. So what does this moment mean for us? Maybe it means our world still wants real leaders. Maybe it means holiness still moves us, even when clothed in humor and humility. Maybe it means that sometimes, love needs boundaries, but never walls. And maybe, just maybe, it means the Church, in all her frailty, is still capable of surprising grace. If this story moved you, tell us in the comments. Should Pope Leo increase his security? Or should he keep walking among the people? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video, because the world needs stories like this. Stories that remind us. Even in chaos, grace lands. And sometimes, the holiest people are the ones who laugh through the unplanned.